Good morning, welcome to the Morning Drive. This is Javon Pera. We're going to talk about some terms. So today's term that we're going to talk about is the ego. So what is the ego? Well, ego is Latin. I believe it's a Latin word. It just means I. All it means is I, like I am happy, that kind of I. And it's really the false self. It's the self that we've made up. It's thought that it's really an evolutionary tool that we use so that we can put ourselves out there and experience things without actually putting our real self out there, so to speak, and get hurt. So if you're a caveman and you want to know if it's going to be dangerous to go outside, if there's a tiger outside, it would be better to imagine what it would be like to go outside and think, oh, hey, that tiger in the past has eaten everybody else that goes outside when the tiger's there, so I think maybe he'll eat me if I go out there. And we basically imagine this other self so that we can experience things in life and gather information and make better decisions right now. So this ego, though, has evolved with each one of us to be more real than the real self, because the real self that we have, which is a spiritual concept here, and I would say more reality. The real self is the part of you that isn't changed. So the ego, for example, changes. So imagine who you were when you were born. You didn't even know you had a name. You didn't know that you had any separation from anybody. You opened your eyes when you were born and you thought everything was you. You thought everything was you. You thought your mom was you. You thought the surrounding was you. You thought everything was you. That you had there was no differentiation between everything that you saw and was experiencing and yourself. Zero, which is super spiritual. No separation. That's beautiful. Separation, by the way, is really the definition of hell. So imagine no separation. You're in heaven, basically. So over the years, though, you pick up these cues from the outside world. They start calling you this particular name or this particular phrase, like Javon. And then pretty soon, me as a baby, growing up into a kid, now I start to respond to this particular sound, Javon. And now I think, oh, I'm Javon. I get it. And so now I start to develop this thing called an ego. I start to develop this concept of who I am that's different from one with everything. And over the years, you'll see with a kid, once they realize that they're separate, they start to freak out a little bit. They get scared. Then they start to get controlling. Like, oh, now that I am in control and I know that I'm separate, I'm gonna get mine. And the kids learn mine, like mine. So if there's separation, well, now I'm going to make sure that I get mine, because if I don't get mine, then you're gonna have mine, and then I'm gonna have nothing. And then all this concept of lack comes. Like, I'm not going to have enough, which also didn't exist when there was no separation. And the ego builds up. This separate identity builds up, which it's fine. It's not a bad thing. However, if you get too caught up in this thing called ego, the ego starts to develop its own rules. The ego takes the mind, which is just a process of thinking and analyzing data, and it starts to use it for its own means of keeping you separate. The ego's number one job is to keep you separate. Keep you separate. Because if you weren't separate, the ego wouldn't exist anymore. And without existence, it would be the same as dying. And how does it feel to die? Well, most people, dying is a major fear. Number one fear in America, dying. Public speaking's number two, beside the point. But if you're separate, you're going to die. So at all costs, the ego is scared to death of dying, and it keeps you separate from everybody no matter what. It promises happiness outside you. It promises you're going to be happy and you're going to be filled if you keep on searching. If you have more money, if you have a different partner, if you get rid of your partner, if you had a better stuff, if you were more popular or more famous, it's all outside you. Keep pushing, because happiness in that process of looking and searching, it's developing your ego as separate, and it's really just keeping it alive and keeping it surviving. So this ego hey, it's nice to be here. Without the ego, we wouldn't be having this experience of life while we're here. But know that it's not you. It's not the real you. It's just a hologram. It's all it is of the real you, so you can experience life here. Now, the beautiful thing about that, here's the beautiful thing about that, is the thing that burdens your heart, the sorrow that you have, the depression, all these things, it's all because you think you don't have what you want. But it's not true. That peace and love and the peace and love and what's the other one? Joy. Those are the main things. It's all available, but it's internal. It's not external. And your ego is telling you it's out there, but the ego is not telling the truth. It's not a bad thing. It's just the ego's job to keep you separate, or else it wouldn't be alive anymore. The truth is, we're all connected. All these strangers are your friends. All these strangers are a part of you. It's a part of this one thing that God is totally orchestrating and totally envelops and is keeping alive. And the dance goes on so we can have this experience of life. So know that. Don't be swept up in the illusion that you're separate and alone. It's not true. Go back to how it was to be a baby, thinking that you were everything and you were your mom, and the world that you saw was a part of you, because it's more true than this thing that the ego is telling us is true. Term for the day: ego.